I'd like to call this work session order now that Pete's arrived. We can start it. This is on the 2018 proposed budget overview, general government operating and capital budget, part 2. Let's go around the room and identify ourselves for the record. Felix, we'll start with you, sir.
Felix Rivera.
Christopher Constant.
Dick Trainey.
Pete Peterson.
Jim Steele.
Suzanne LeBrun. Amy Demboski.
Lance Wilbur.
Okay, Lance,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
lead off, sir.
Well, we are scheduled from 12:30 to 4:30. The primary time will be spent on working on the utilities and enterprise ACDA. But before we begin there, what I thought we could do is finish up the general government. There are 4 or 5 departments we were not able to finish from last week. So I'm going to start with those departments and then we'll go straight into the utilities. The format will be basically the same. In the case for the utilities and enterprise, I've asked the general managers if they could join us today in the event, because the executive managers are out of town. So in the event that there's questions that I can't answer, they might be able to help me with on the presentation. Similar to last week, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them as I present the presentation. We have a list of about 17 questions from last week we're working on for you, run them by Rose, and we'll try to get those responses to you before next Friday, definitely before the second public hearing. And if you have additional questions as from last week or this week, just send them to Rose, and I'll compile them to the response as fast as I can.
Lance, I'm concerned about one thing yesterday. Zal was here with IT, and he says he has no idea how much money he needs to build his force up so SAP can be done. And that concerns us because I saw the budget, what he's asking for. Would you check with Zal to see if he really doesn't understand how much money he needs for his operation? Because yesterday he stood right here and told us, I have no idea how much money I need. And if he's asking for a budget, I want to know exactly if we're going to approve the budget, we'll just take care of his needs. It was just an odd statement to make at budget time.
I'll speak with Zal.
So, thank you.
So let's go ahead and,
Sorry,
Mr. Chairman, we'll go ahead and start where we left off last week. So we have about 5 departments to go over. Again, this is, it'll be on the slide deck that goes, the second one past that will be operating budgets continued. So basically, the mayor's budget, proposed budget for 2018, has a couple changes and modifications into it. The first one is he has one, I believe is a vacant special administrative assistant position, and that position will remain vacant in 2018. Also has proposing some changes in some non-labor professional services scattered throughout all of those areas right there. The mayor is not proposing any changes to the contributions to community grants, so that's the mayor's proposal.
We're right here on page 17. Sorry, on this one.
So on the slide, on these slides, it says number 2, but in your slide deck, it should be slide 17. Thank you.
Question from assembly members. Okay.
Okay.
We normally have a traditional policy. We don't mess with the mayor's budget. He doesn't mess with ours.
Okay.
So it's just a non-aggression policy. Welcome, Eric.
Unless needed.
So in your original slide deck, this would be slide 18 on the PowerPoint on slide number 3. In the Office of Management and Budget, the changes from management budget would be the assembly put in, I think, $40,000. We were going to do some detailed reviews of individual departments due to a variety of other workload issues. We weren't able to get to that. However, the administration wants to pick that back up. We've been talking with some other vendors who have actually done this before, one particularly who has done this with the state, has some experience in it. So asking that, or proposing that there be about $100,000 that would be for primarily professional services contract to support that effort. In OMB, we have a proposal to eliminate one position. And part of this proposal is the administration's direction to departments to save 0.5%. So this is how we would get there. It would induce a little bit of overtime, so we would have some overtime effort there. So that is what would happen in the Office of Management and Budget.
Felix has a question for you, sir. Felix?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wilbur, I'm wondering if perhaps part of that 100,000 can be used, or if it's planned to be used as sort of a test case for zero-based budgeting. I know that that was something that was brought up at the last budget hearing, and it'd be great if it makes sense. Obviously, your discretion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Are we
Mr.
asking
Steele?
questions at
Yes,
this
sir.
point?
We are.
My question is with regards to the SAP position. Based upon what we heard the other day, we still got some severe problems with SAP, and the question is whether or not that position is needed.
Thank you. So in our budget in 2017, I did have a position that was solely specific for SAP when we were building SAP. And since SAP is built, I don't need those resources right now.
So you don't need it for SAP operation. I mean, the build is over with. That portion of SAP is done. But we're now concerned about standing up the operation and getting it to work.
And right now, I have one person, one budget analyst that's 100% dedicated to the build of SAP and the operation post October to support that. And I would say probably another analyst where 50 to 75% of their time is in support of SAP.
Yeah. Tim, anything else?
So,
Anybody? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next department is the assembly. So basically the proposal that was submitted to OMB, we have some elimination of one full-time administrative assistant position inside the clerk's office. I believe that position.
That's a vacant administrative assistant position in the
Thank you,
clerk's
Rose.
office.
And then some further adjustments into professional services. And I think similar to the mayor's office, the OMB, the assembly has come forth and provided a proposal that provides some reductions inside their budget for 2018.
About 4.7, Rose?
It is about 4.7% of the Assembly's total budget. We looked at the areas we could reduce. The municipal audit is housed within the Assembly, and we are not able to reduce those costs. Unfortunately, your salaries are set by the Salaries and Emoluments Commission, so we are also unable to reduce those. We
Or raise
excluded those
it.
two costs, and we
It can't be raised or lowered.
came to about 5.5% savings in this scenario.
And Rose and I just met with BDO, and they're coming in for an increase on the audit based on the fact we have SAP now. And we're looking at what, 4 or 5%?
They proposed more than that.
Okay, well, we're negotiating. That's where we are with that. Questions from Assembly members? Thank you, Lance.
The next department is Equal Rights Commission, Ambassadors Organization. So in Pam's proposal, similarly to the other departments, in order to meet that 0.5% target, she's making some adjustments to 2 full-time positions, investigator positions, basically adjusting the grades in order to meet that accommodation. That's the biggest, the primary method in which she's going to meet that target.
Questions from Assembly members? Thank you, Lance. It's never pleasant for any department like that. Amy?
I do have a question. I remember last year in the Equal Rights Commission, they increased their, I think it was last year, they increased the travel budget. Can you describe for me where they're traveling to? What are they doing? Why?
I can either ask Pam to help the company address that one, or I can get back to you on that one.
Because, yeah, I was gonna say, in 2016, their budget was 6,000.
6,700.
Yeah, 6,700. They revised it last year, they're holding it steady, so I would like to know what kind of traveling they're doing.
Okay.
We're joined by Mr. Whittleton for the record.
I will get that to you.
Thank you, sir. Other questions from Assembly members? Thank you.
So the last department in the general government that we review is internal audit, and the target in Mike Chadwick's group is about around $30,000, and the way he's going to do that is he currently has a vacant position, and he's going to keep that open. That's the proposal that he has.
I just personally have a problem with doing that. I just have a problem with what he wants to do. I know he has to meet our requirements, but we depend upon the internal auditor to go across the city finding problems we didn't know we had, like the last 3 audits he did for us. I'm really concerned about us cutting one position out of there. Even though it's vacant, he does need the position. Yes, Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lance, we've talked a lot over the years about Muni and the Anchorage School District sharing some of the audit functions. Where are the costs and the cost sharing housed? Is it in this department or is it somewhere else?
I will confirm that they are in here.
And
One,
can
I
you
think one is
estimate-
in here, Amy. One is paid for by the school district auditor we have.
Okay, yeah, could you just give me the breakdown? I just wanna make sure I'm looking at the right thing.
I think the other one would be this.
I knew there was one somewhere else. That's why I was asking. I couldn't.
I'll write it down.
Okay, thank you.
Tim?
How many of the full-time positions are auditors? I presume the part-time is not necessarily, but do we have
think he's
a
got
breakdown
two.
of what those positions are?
Actually, the part-time, I'll confirm, but I believe the part-time position may, yeah, I'll find out. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's,
Go ahead,
it's
Felix.
on, not that it's on page 6, if you have the full binder. So the part-time position is an audit technician, whatever that is, and then all the rest of them are different types of auditors.
That's the one that does the work.
Anything else?
Well, quick question then.
Go ahead,
This-
Chris.
The reduction is just a temporary reduction by 1/4 of the year, right? And so, is there a lot of audit action that happens between January and March?
There's a lot of audit action going on. We can have Mike explain to us if you'd like him to.
A lot of that is going on by video though, too.
I know, but a lot of it's done by him too, as we see all these audit reports come in. So when you get the binder from the audit, please read it. I found the one on the library to be fascinating. They hadn't done anything on the roster, putting on the money they'd had since 2012 coming in. That concerns me.
The private donation thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the reason I asked Fred, our audit chairman, to have a meeting on that. It's concerning.
Let's get pizza, huh?
Other questions? Thank you, Lance.
Yeah, my biggest concern is the hours.
So I'm gonna switch gears. This should be the separate packet that's titled Utilities and Enterprise and Community Development Authority. We're gonna start off in a little different order than we've done in the past. We're gonna start off with the Community Development Authority. This is Andrew Halco's group here. We won't talk much about what's in the, in each one, in this book right here, for those members, particularly for the new assembly members, in the budget book, there is a section in each one of these, and I'll try to highlight the page. There's one page in each one of these that talks about highlights and changes that are coming up through the year, and they're really in text words, the difference between 17 and 18. There's a one-page synopsis for pretty much every utility that gives a summary of what those changes are. But, and I'll try to highlight them as I go through the departments. ACDA, basically staff of 48 folks. They don't have any recommended changes in the number of positions that they have. Again, these guys manage all of our parking facilities, both those facilities on the ground. As far as the revenues are concerned, they have a little bit of change in the revenues between 17 and 18 as it's proposed. And for those members, the slide deck, this says slide number 9. This is the slides on my presentation. In the packet, there should be actually slides number 3. So just to try to keep that.
So 3's 9.
And then, so a little bit of change in their revenues going down a little bit, and as well as their expenses also going down a little bit. But overall, the difference between 2017 and 2018, there's not a significant change in the budget, overall budget.
Question from some members. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 5, toward the top there, I noticed that the other operating revenue is projected to be down about 80-some thousand, looks like. Do we know what kind of revenue, exactly what revenue that is?
I don't know, maybe Mr. Alfred.
sorry, I'm not quite sure. I don't have a page 5.
So I think the difference.
Try page 3 in your packet. It may be that in your packet if you got the same one we do.
I think Andrew is referring
Oh,
to
yeah.
this one right here, or it says other operating revenue at the top. It says operating revenue, the first one is parking, second is lease, and then other operating revenue. Is that the one you're referring to, Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Yes, those are the associated fees that generate revenue, not parking citations, but various things we do. We process APD, parking tickets, some associated services that we do with the municipality. Those are kind of the odds and ends, more along the lines of the citation revenues and miscellaneous revenues. Very small portion.
All right, thank you.
Other questions, Ms. Summey members? Ms. Dombrowski, ma'am.
Thank you. I would love to hear from the director, just to hear about the changes in the parking situation we talked about last time, and give you an opportunity to talk about the rooftop or the food trucks. You guys have some new things going on, and I'd just like to see how it's going. Please.
Okay, so a little bit of an operational update. Over the last 2 years, we have done some more image/business boosting initiatives. You know, the rooftop, we view the rooftop as an incredible investment because what it does is our key target demographics in the Fifth Avenue Garage are women and children, women with children. What we're seeing now is, you know, they come, they shop, they spend an extra hour, they're up on the rooftop, they're playing basketball, they're skating, they're doing something, and they're staying longer in the garage, which of course increases revenue for us, increases revenue for the city because we pay and tax on revenue. So those have been some of the more community-oriented. What we're really focused on over the last year and the coming year are actual development projects, housing downtown. So as many of you know, the Transit Center is in the middle of an RFP. We have 2 very, very, very qualified bidders who made the cut and proceeded to the next round. The technical requirements for the RFP are due November 17th. Their financial backup is due December 1st. So we anticipate the board evaluating the Transit Center proposals that first week of December. So hopefully by the middle of December, maybe 3rd week of December, we might be able to announce a project, but we're very excited. We've got 3 other projects on the hopper. We're preparing a first quarter RFP for 8th and K, which is where the food trucks are stationed. But we have a vision for that, those 3 city parcels, where ACDA would create a private-public partnership. ACDA, because we have bonding authority, we can build 2 floors of parking garage and then come to you as a private contractor and say, okay, we'll take care of the cost of the parking garage, you build housing on top, we'll share the cost. So that's 8th and K. We've also begun looking at our property on 3rd and E, which is directly behind the Sunshine Mall. There's a good opportunity there for structured parking, which would generate revenue for ACDA, create parking, which is needed in that area, and then we view maybe market condos for sale. The big piece we're working on, and we should have an agreement within 6 or 7 months, is the Jcpenney Garage. We are in negotiations with Jcpenney. We have the parking contract through 2020. The building needs to be demolished within the next 5 years. The whole garage needs to come down. So we are actively working with Jcpenney to understand expectations. They have the property. They clearly recognize their engineering report says the exact same thing our engineering report has said for years, that the garage, in order to extend the life of that garage, you have to invest way more than the building is actually worth. So we envision within 2 years having an RFP on the street, again, private-public partnership, with ACDA bringing in the parking component, providing the structured parking, and working with the developers to possibly add a hotel or housing. Jcpenney wants to come in as the landowner. So there's a lot of good stuff that has been happening under the radar. As we all know, this takes a lot longer than you anticipate. But there's some good things going on. So aside from some of the more, image, polish, stuff on downtown with the food trucks, our big focus is really actually putting some housing and increasing the tax base downtown. So those are the things we're working on. We're actually bringing up We're trying to begin, create a stronger relationship with local developers. On November 9th, we're bringing up 2 experts from the lower 48 on private-public partnerships. Now that the state has passed SB 100 and you will have the ability to craft individual tax incentives, they're going to come up and they're going to talk to developers about what's worked in other cities, what's been beneficial, what hasn't worked. So we're really trying to push this idea of private-public partnerships, because with the state's resources tight, the city's resources tight, there's not going to be a lot of capital money, I don't envision, in the next 5 to 10 years. So we really feel like these private-public partnerships, where, for instance, on 8th and K, where we would come in and if you were a developer, we'd say, okay, look, parking is a huge cost to this development. We'll build the parking, we'll create the revenue stream to manage the parking, and then you come in as a contractor and you build housing or condo that meets the market needs. So those are the things that we are working on. We anticipate business-wise, we took a hit last year, revenue was down for a number of reasons. Contraction in downtown employment. For the last 6 months of last year, we actually gave away an hour free parking for the first time at the Fifth Avenue Garage. It cost us about $200,000. But we did that because we were having conversations about Saturday enforcement, and the whole idea about Saturday enforcement wasn't to generate revenue, was to get people off the streets and into the garage, so we offered the hour free. Then when Saturday pay was put on hold, we continued to offer the hour free because we felt that was important for the merchants. Now we do have Saturday enforcement. We are not, people do not have to pay on Saturday, but we are enforcing the time limits. The success has been overwhelming. We've been able to cut the number of cars that sit on the street the entire day by 50%. Now the employees that are parking there have just said, okay, fine, I'm gonna pay a $20 ticket, I don't care. But for the most part of those, we've gotten those employees off the street and into the garage with special discounts for retail employees. So with regards to parking and development, we're really trying to tee up the downtown development in a way where we're managing ahead of the curve. We've studied downtown a lot over the years, and I think we can all agree that it's tended to ebb and flow over the last 20 or 30 years. But the one thing downtown has consistently lacked is that it's a full-time residential population downtown. You get people living downtown, suddenly the city doesn't shut down at 6. Suddenly you got friends and family wandering around at 8 or 9. Businesses are more viable. These independent merchants that make downtown, that create the backbone for downtown, have more business and more customers. And that's really what we're focused on. It's a two-pronged approach. One, it's providing a necessary demand from the market, because there is a demand for downtown housing. 2, to increase the tax base. And 3, really to create the overall incentive where every community that struggled with downtown development in the country has found that housing is the key. You gotta have people, you gotta have feet on the street. And that's what we've been told consistently by everybody from Walgreens to other economic development agencies across the country. You have to have feet on the street full time. So that's really what we're focused on.
Mr. Bowski, to continue.
Can you give us a glimpse at how you view the cash position of your department? Because clearly your operating revenues are significantly projected to be lower than they were last year. And the operating expenses are staying pretty much the same. So I would just like to get your perspective on how you're going to weather the storm and what you anticipate might happen next year.
Absolutely, great question. With regards to revenue, the revenue has decreased. We anticipate a revenue decrease because of the changes that we're making to eventually grow the business. For instance, this time last year in the transit center, I had 12 paying tenants. Today I have 2, because the idea is, in 6 or 7 months, we've got to have that place empty. So we've been weeding people out, so we're losing monthly lease revenue to a number of tenants in the transit center we had planned. Also, no question about it, public safety. Some of the issues we've had have driven people out of the garages. For the first time last year, the entire year, we had to compete with the state who opened their garage to public parking, so suddenly we had a competitor. But the big thing is, the expenses, the big thing is, when you look at the line item for professional and contract services, it is $1,045,000. Of that $1,045,000, roughly 70% of that is security and janitorial. And 80% of that is for the transit center. So So not only am I spending basically $550,000 to $600,000 a year cleaning and securing the transit center, but on top of that, I'm losing money. That's why it makes this redevelopment so critical, because until we change the face of that city block, you know, whoever sits in my chair in 5 or 10 years, you're gonna have a money-losing building, and that's what we've been thankful. So when we look at revenues, we're factoring in a couple of things. We're factoring in, we're losing revenue generated by the 3 lots on 7th and I, because Cook Inlet Housing is gonna be building the housing there this summer, so we're gonna be losing that revenue. We are gonna continue to lose tenant space. We have 3 tenants left. We anticipate a drop in people mover tenant space too when we move them out. So the drop in revenue is not just the softening economy, it's because we're intentionally doing things that are gonna take away revenue streams. The goal at the end of the day is to have a redeveloped facility, more attractive tenants, maybe a hotel, maybe housing, more people in the garage, more revenue. That's the intent. But I never worked in an organization where you are so handcuffed. I mean, I spend $600,000, $550,000 a year on security. And all my security guys do are babysit drunks in that transit center for 12 hours a day. And I have no control of it because it's a public open space. And that's the first thing we have to fix is fixing that, because it's not only a public health safety issue, I mean, it is a fiscal issue. I mean, that building is just hemorrhaging. And it's 32 years old. I mean, so not only is it a bad structural building, but all of the guts have to come out. Everything. It's a mess. So hopefully in another 2 months we'll have a clear picture.
Thank you, Amy.
And I'm sure you're hearing the complaints about the transit center, and you have for years. So we think we're turning the ball.
Eric?
Yeah, I know we've got to move on. I echo a lot of that. I asked to serve on this board, really excited about the leadership and the innovation that he's showing. I think we're on a path to get it both to financial solvency and to be a development incubator or facilitator for a lot of the things we want to do. Kind of similar to the way we used land ownership to get what we couldn't pay in cash for on the senior housing and redevelopment in Midtown. We can use this authority and Andrew's leadership to get a lot of things done that we're just not ready either to bond or write a check for. So, and there's this give and take. You'll see me proposing after we get through probably with the budget discussions, giving them some more clear instructions. We had a great strategic meeting, but there is this kind of what do you want us to be aspect to this entity. And obviously we're the policymakers, so let's say, here's the parameters we'd like you to go out and do. And I think he's got a great team to do it. So
I would like to also point out one thing, and this is really critical. We anticipate that the organization will have to contribute to the redevelopment of the transit center. So when you look at our capital budget, for instance, last year our CapEx was $2.1 million. We have spent over the last 4 or 5 years, we've spent over $6 million investing in repairing our garages. This year, because 2 things. One, because we're all caught up on that really expensive maintenance. We just finished, I think, $1.7 million this past summer spent at 7th Avenue Garage. We anticipate that we will have capital expenditure needs for the transit center. But in conversations internally, in conversations with our development committee and our board, we felt it was best, since this is ACDA's first project, not our first project, but our first private-public partnership project, that we should reach out to the assembly and make you partners in this to make sure we have the checks and balances. So we anticipate, maybe in 3 months, maybe in 4 months, maybe in January, February, coming back to the assembly and letting you know what we need for capital. And this is 2 things. Number one, again, I can't stress this enough, that we feel like if we do this transit center redevelopment right, the public will be appreciative and we'll have support when we move on to do 8th and K and 3rd and E. So we feel that the only way that we can do this right is to bring the assembly in as a partner. So what we'll do is we'll be coming back to you. I'm not quite sure how many times in the next year, but we'll be coming back to you saying, okay, this is what the project calls for, this is what we need, and we'll seek your permission to spend that money. Because as you know, you basically give us spending approval, and if we need to spend over a certain amount, we have to come back. But we want to bring you in from the first time that we look at what ACDA is going to be expected to participate with the developer. we want to make sure that the assembly is engaged from day one.
Thank you, Andrew. Tim, you're next, then Chris.
Yeah, Andrew, a good report. I'm really interested in it. Are you constrained to downtown?
No, and we're looking elsewhere. I mean, we have property in Mountain View. We've talked to some folks about providing structural parking in Spinard. And that's really what we're trying to do. Over the last 2 years, we've really tried to take an inventory because our organization is kind of been dormant for so long. I mean, we really need to get in, take a look at our assets. What are the opportunities? What are the possibilities that we can do? How can we leverage our existing assets to benefit the city and to benefit downtown the city? But there's nothing that holds us downtown. The only reason we've been focused on downtown is because that's primarily where our assets are located.
I was thinking specifically of Spinard and the Beartooth opportunities.
Yeah.
In that neck of the woods,
We're
or
engaged,
all along
yeah.
that corridor, actually.
And we're engaged in, we've been engaged in conversations with Tudor Housing. We're also engaged on the
Tudor?
Elmwood property, providing
Okay.
structural parking.
About Tudor and,
Tudor and Elmwood, yeah.
Okay, good.
Chris?
Yeah, that brings an interesting thought. If the benefits of the body or of your corpus are gonna go to Spinard, then I would like to see parking meters in Spinard too, because it shouldn't be a cost borne by the downtown and then benefits projected across town without really contemplating. But that's not my point. My point right now is to say thank you. You hinted at janitorial being an important cost in that kind of large pool of money that you spend, security and janitorial. And I have for years had a habit of holding my breath no matter how high in the parking garages I have to park as I go down the stairs, because I always use the stairs and it's a nightmare in the stairway most of the time. Remarkably, in the last 4 months, it has been different. And so it is apparent you're spending your money on janitorial services, and my neighbors are grateful. Thank you.
It is
Any other questions?
As you know, the stairwells are a seasonal problem. I mean, in the wintertime, people
Flows
migrate
down, yeah.
indoors, so we try and keep that focused.
Any other questions from some of you members? Ms. Dombrowski?
I have a comment. You know, I really appreciate Mr. Hopper coming up and giving us this description. And I did it on purpose because I knew how many different things they were engaged in. And I really wanted the opportunity to be able to highlight it for the whole body. But this is why it's so important to have department directors present their budgets. And I sat here all last week and I gave this quick gloss through. This is what, our 4th department now?
Yep.
And they go by like this quick, and if we went to Boston, we would have heard all this great stuff. So, you know, I just go back to the leadership and say there's a reason we fought so hard to get department directors to come and talk to us. It's because those little tiny details that might otherwise slip through the budget process that are important to foreshadow what they're going to come back and ask for later. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Andrew, anytime you want to meet with the assembly, let us know. We can provide any Fridays you want for a work session of any kind.
In about middle of December, end of December, I mean, we'll have.
That's
a
fine. We'll
clear
give you the
picture.
time.
So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
But thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Lance?
Moving right along.
I'm going to toss on Andrew's capital budget, so the next department is solid waste services. So solid waste services, again, just to remind everybody, the slide deck that I have, I added the original department, so this should be slide
Size 5 on ours.
So solid waste, many of you that know, they have basically two businesses. They have disposal and they have collections. So we're going to talk about disposal first. Again, I've just taken copies of a couple of the pages that are inside of your budget books. And first one here, this is their 8-year summary, and this will be a similar format that you'll see for all of the utilities coming forward. I just kind of want to highlight some of the changes between one or the other, and then Mr. Bowski's point, you do have department head here, so if you have any questions. But overall, solid waste services as a department, there's really not a significant change between what's going on in 2017 and 2018. Primarily on the disposal side, there's very little movement. I think their overall budget is going to go up by about 0.8%. Their revenues are up about 0.1%, maybe 0.2%. And then their capital program in the disposal side is pretty significant. It's about $8 million, and we'll get to that. And on the refuse side, they do have a little bit more changes. There's the change is about 10% on the refuse side. This slide here is your summary of disposal. I don't know if there's anything particular that you want to have any questions on this slide. I can go through the revenues, expenses, and then we can come back to that if we have particular questions.
Questions on this slide from assembly members?
It's a lot of detail.
John has a question, sir. Lance, John has a question. Mr. Littleton?
So you're running at a loss and you're digging into your cash to cover it, it looks like? Is that right?
Is that correct?
And that's, shouldn't you be getting more, I mean, your landfill, you're supposed to be piling money away for that. Shouldn't your cash go up, or is that was a different fund?
We put aside money every year for the long-term care closure.
The gap in closure.
So that's a separate fund?
Yes.
So you're flush with cash and you're just gonna run it down?
Actually, the closure fund is part of this. It's showing up as an expense
There it is, right here.
annually, but if you, I think it's like about the 10th row down, it shows the amount of cash that we have invested for the care and closure fund, which is actually the investment fund handled by Treasury now.
Frankly, it's showing up like that as a loss now, and that's just because we tend to be very conservative with our finances, but if you look back at the historical trends in disposal, we've run a pretty healthy profit over the past, recent past. So again, this is our most conservative outlook on the future.
Mr. Littleton?
It's a little bit separate, but can other companies compete against you? I know at Alaska Waste, there's a new dumpster company. It seems like every couple of years there's a new one, then Alaska Waste buys it, then there's another new one. Can they do that in your area?
Well, that's related to our collections utility, and no, they can't. So the only way that we can have, like, I don't want to say a competitor because we really don't have a competitor because we have a defined service area, is if it's a service that we don't offer. So if somebody needs a roll-off within our service area, we don't have a roll-off service or line of business, then we allow them an exemption to come and, place the roll-off in our service area.
And is that because the city ordinance says no competition with solid waste services?
Eric?
Yeah, so I have questions about the landfill closure cost fund as well. So you're proposing putting 1.3 million in this year, right? Am I reading that on? And that would bring the fund up to over 38. Landfill closure cost, cash reserve. Is that line near the bottom, 38 million, 38.445?
I think it'll be 34 next year.
So there's landfill closure cost, cash reserve, you're reading another line. Where's that?
That's the one. I was just looking at this year.
Oh, I was projecting it on. I see. I've done it wrong there. Okay, so 34. Do you have an active internal process to see whether, because there's a significant possibility, and I don't know whether it's probability or even certainty, that none of that will be needed. That is, they will actually turn a profit after we close it for a suitable amount of time based on methane production. So do you have a process to see whether that amount and the continuing because without putting in 1.3 million this year, you're almost at break even. And if you don't make that contribution and you determine that contribution wasn't needed to be made, it's a little underwater, but not much. So do you have a process looking at whether this is needed at all?
So, first of all, the process for doing the liability for the landfill closure.
Sir, could you identify yourself for the record?
Oh, my name's Tim Kelly. I'm the finance officer.
Okay.
So,
Because my machine doesn't recognize
sorry.
people.
Sorry. So future landfill closure liability is a process where basically what we do is we look at the amount of the landfill used and we have an estimated cost for the closure, the actual putting the cover on top and then operating it for at least 10 years after we close it. And we did bring that point up to the auditors when we discussed this process. And they said that we cannot use the landfill gas revenues as an offset in the future because it's an indeterminate amount. We wouldn't know what the amount of the revenues would be at the time of the closure. So even though that scientifically we know that there would be some, but we don't know what the business would be, because you're looking right now at closure date is probably 2016.
Yeah. Well, and is that a federal law, a state law, our law, or an accounting principle that you're running up?
That's a federal law. We're required to do that by the Department of Protection.
Well, so in what way do we fix it? Because in that, if the basic principles are true, that is, if the basic idea is we thought we were gonna have to cover it, that has a cost, and spend money protecting it, watching it, whatever, and it looks like that cost is now some sort of positive, net positive, we don't know what, but it's very likely that it doesn't in fact cost us money, but makes us a small amount. In what way can I affect that? Because that one, it's not just the 32 million that, 34, I guess. I mean, 1.3 we could do a lot with, you could do a lot with. 32 million we could do a fair amount with. And we're in pretty tight budget times. I don't want to do that if it really is not what we need. So is there a process for us to do something about that?
I guess I'm not really following the question.
I don't want to keep putting 1.3 million into a fund we don't need. Tell me how I can stop doing it.
So, Mr. Chairman, can you jump in here?
Go ahead, Lance.
I think this question came up in the past, and there was either through an auditing process or a legal review, we are required to contribute into the closure fund at a rate that is, I guess, relative to when we actually think it's going to close. Our ability not to contribute, I do not believe is an option. The amount we contribute.
Is that an option?
Is a subject, but I know that we've had some opinions in the past, probably like 3 years ago, about whether or not how much we have to contribute into the liability to the closure fund. And I can get back with you on that, or I can talk with Mark about the information and Tim with the information I have. This may sound familiar to them as well.
I'll bet
Eric?
you a buck we can change it, but I'll work on it.
Let's find out and make sure we can, because it's
Just
an
the
option.
rule.
I've got Mr. Steele. Before I go to him, the tipping fee's been $16 for about the last. Let's see, Janice Schamberg was on the assignment with me, so probably the last 10 years. Can we raise the tipping fee? Does it make any sense to raise it $1 to 17? Because nothing's been static for 10 years.
At this point, it doesn't make any sense. However, we are actively looking at when it's going to make sense and when we're going to need to transfer a disposal rate.
Okay. Mr. Steele.
Yeah, just quickly now. Refresh my memory in terms of the potential for expansion on that site. How much more time do we have there? Is there more property available from the Air Force or the Army or military?
Theoretically, there is, but we're not counting on that. If you remember the last meeting that we had at the work with Kimberly to prepare cards, so maybe it was an overview for our department. There is an additional 200 plus acres that are adjacent to the Anchorage Regional Landfill. However, it's in the hands of the military right now. I think the last time that we got space from the military for the landfill, it took an act of,
Act of Congress?
Basically an act of Congress.
If
So-
we don't have that option, what's our option? Valley or where?
We don't know that yet. There aren't really any local available options, just because of the scarcity of property that you would need for a facility like that are available within the Anchorage Bowl and within the general area.
And the other, just as a statement, the other item I'm interested in is taking advantage of that gas we're flaring off. And either work with Doyle on either a smaller unit or another unit to pick up that.
Yep, and we've been working with them pretty much hand in hand since I started on that. However, it involves the military, and I don't going to the federal government, under the bus, but sometimes that can take a long time to do those types of negotiations. But we're certainly pushing them in that direction and trying to work with them as best we can to make sure that we're beneficially utilizing as much.
What's the military do with their disposal?
It all comes to us.
Okay, and then I think it's time to invite somebody to lunch and have a conversation about that. It would be nice to tie something.
Right.
Tim, would you add that as a thing, subject for your January meeting? Because we've been talking about what they've been flaring off there for a couple of years, and we really need to get something defined, because all we're doing is flaring fuel off that can be used to produce electricity. And we have to meet
I
with
bring
the
it up at
feds
every
somewhere.
opportunity.
I know, but I'm talking about January having a Sunday work session on it. I want to get this thing resolved, because we keep flaring off, it could be turned into energy. Ms. Dombrowski,
Good
ma'am?
relationships.
Thank you. So as I'm reading your budget, Mark, it looks like you're anticipating about $1.8 million for sales of the methane gas for 2018. If we were to be able to bring a third, or not a third, a final, because I think we can only fit one more turbine in there in order to process that, how much more do you think that would generate potentially?
Potentially another $300,000 approximately.
Okay. And how frequently are we having to flare off methane? The reason I
It's
ask.
like it's every day.
Okay, the reason I ask, I'm starting to get quite a few complaints from Eagle Point, that neighborhood. Over the years, I've gotten them here and there, but it seems to be more and more and more frequent. If we're flaring, I don't know what else we can do. I mean, we're flaring off clearly. So do you have any?
We're flaring off every
We're
day.
expanding the rate with which we develop new gas wells at the landfill. So I think historically, we've done about 3 a year, and that's, the landfill moves, as stuff decomposes. And when the pipes are in a static place, when it moves, it can have issues and impact those wells. So a lot of our time has been spent repairing damaged wells with new wells. What we're proposing this year is to add a couple more wells per year. So instead of doing 3 a year or budgeting for that, we plan on doing 5 next year to help us to collect more of the methane, to make sure that when we do have issues, when a well collapses or a well fails, that's sometimes what leads to those smells that people that happen like that. So if we can become more proactive with developing wells, collecting the gas, and managing the gas collection system better, hopefully that'll reduce the number of complaints and aesthetic issues that arise because of that.
I like hearing that. My initial thought when you started talking was thinking just more wells mean more smell, but actually what you're saying is by preventatively kind of capturing it, we'll hopefully diminish that.
Correct.
Okay. My second question, have we finally gone to using credit cards, being able to use debit cards or credit cards at the landfill? Because this is,
It's
I
a
haven't been
continual
there for a while.
problem.
I haven't been there for a while, but that's like the number one thing. People are like, I wish I could use it.
Yes, we accept credit cards now.
Good. I think that was about a year and a half ago. Is that when you were talking about it last?
It was a shock to me that we didn't accept, that it took until 2016.
I think it was, yeah. I appreciate that, thank you. I just never followed up, so.
Any questions from assembly members? Yes, John, I'm sorry. sir.
On budgeted positions, what does it mean, 63 and 83 in parentheses across? What's the 83?
The first number is the actual positions in the disposal department. The difference between the two is we also have an administrative fund that has has positions in it. But what the administrative fund does is it's like an overhead allocation between both our disposal and our collections utility. So what that is the additional administrative positions.
So if I see 54, that's the people who do the work, and then there's
The other people
29
in the
that-
administrative department work too.
I know, but 29 who direct the work.
Yeah, it's like our customer service, myself, Mark, our AP people, usually the overhead.
Okay, another thing, I don't know if this really affects you, but we just got some email strings, but the fire department's not issuing burn permits. They say we're not going to do it in Anchorage anymore because they don't like fire.
Unless you're
So
homeless.
that means, unless you're homeless, then you can do it in our parks. But if you
Seriously.
I have emails with pictures.
So you might get more branches and trees and stuff if people can't burn them. Is that? But you don't do the wood lots, but you do take some stuff at the
We
main.
take stuff at the landfill.
Right. Would that impact you, or it's not a big deal?
No, I mean, actually, that's kind of in my mind, you know, I won't speak for the guys that really do the work and ladies that do the work, but the more, all that wood that we collect at the Anchorage Regional Landfill basically gets ground up at the end of the year, and we use it as alternative labor cover. So that's kind of the benefit of collecting only waste like that for us. So we still have to pay money, obviously, to hire somebody to come in and grind it. However, we don't have to haul dirt, which if you remember some of the discussions we've had about that, we're eventually gonna run out of cover material and dirt before the projected end of the life of the landfill. So everything that we can do to use stuff like wood chips or use some type of alternative daily cover to offset what we're using from our soil pile, in my mind, is a good move.
Just go ahead, John.
So the wood lot in South Anchorage, we had to pay, I don't know, it was $10 or $15 a load, but bringing it to landfill was free. So do you not have anything to do with the South Anchorage, or why were we paying?
No, that was operated by the fire department, right?
Private party.
And Hydroax is running it.
And can you run it next year, make it free, and you'll get more because we can't burn?
If we can get some more people, we can run that.
No.
Okay.
You gotta pay.
Thanks.
Anything else in the body? Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, there's still gas being created at Merrill, the old Merrill Field landfill. Are we able to sell any of that or generate any electricity from that? Or?
It doesn't have, there's not enough that's being collected or generated there to actually, run that turbine or something like that. However, we have been working with the administration on looking at a possible small district heating loop. So it could power a boiler that could heat potentially some of the buildings there. We just haven't gotten too far down that path yet.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from the assembly members? Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Lance?
Well, that was half their business.
I know. Now we'll do the other half.
Really, thanks, guys. It's very helpful. Tonight, most of disposal on the capital program, Mark mentioned some of the things that they doing here. I think many of you mentioned that they are looking at making some improvements out at the central transfer station. They're buying some heavy equipment. They've been working on leachate improvements out, and I believe that's at the regional landfill. They have, so basically their capital program has 3 or 4 significant projects and a lot of other little pieces of equipment. If you have any questions for them about their capital.
Questions on the capital? Don't appear to be, Lance.
On the refuse side of the house, similarly, we may have questions on this one, but on their capital program is not as significant on the refuse side. Revenues are down a little bit. They're not closing in fee changes.
Question from assembly members. Mr. Bowski, ma'am.
My question for both the collection and the solid waste portion, are within the budgeted positions, are you having some of those budgeted positions vacant, or are they all filled with both?
Pretty much, we try to keep all of our permanent positions filled. We're not holding any vacancies right now, other than some seasonal positions that we have.
Any other questions from assembly members? Thank you.
Pretty much wraps up, unless you have any detailed questions about revenues and expenses on the refuse side of the house.
Any questions from assembly members? Thank you, Lance. Are we still having waste taking the roll-off carts? Are they poaching into our area? Because I know in the past, like the regional hospital, which is in our area, was using Alaska Waste because we didn't have the equipment. Do we now have the equipment? Are we doing that, or are we still letting Alaska Waste?
No, we did a business plan on that a couple of years ago. That was started by my predecessor. But basically, the capital investment that it would required by us as well as the personnel was fairly significant. So just kind of decided to not really.
Just let it go?
Further.
Okay.
I mean, it was a significant capital investment and people investment to make something like that happen.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I've noticed when they're doing roofs in the neighborhood, they've got some private company that comes and drops off. Does the Muni have any of those, or is that what you're talking about, the roll-offs?
That's what we're talking about.
All right. And so, yeah, obviously those are probably pretty spendy because they're made of steel, and
Yep.
so it'd be a big capital investment.
And you require an investment in equipment, you know, you gotta have trucks to haul it, you gotta have people to drive the trucks, you need the space to store the trucks, to store the roll-offs.
I get it. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Chris?
The roll-off's the same as just a dumpster. I just linguistically know. So we do the dumpsters downtown. Okay, so the roll-offs are a larger scale.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Lance, thank you. Let's move ahead.
Thank you. Great job. So next up is Merrill Field. So as many of you know, yeah, it's okay, you can do that close. My sphere, So, Paul Shop, basically 90% of his operation is supported by the FAA, because most of his revenues are generated by leases that he has out on Merrill Field. So property tax money is used to support Merrill Field operations. And Paul does a great job. He's got a small shop out there, and so he and Alex and Pat, who I work with pretty much all the time. As far as Merrill Field's concerned, I don't know if there's anything particular that I can highlight as a result as it relates to a change between their operating from 17 to 18. I know that they've been doing a lot of work, and again, in the highlight pages, it's page 10. You can read a lot about some of the changes they were doing since 16 with new hangars and a lot of new development. Kind of doing a great job. So I don't know if you have any particular questions of myself or for Paul.
Mr. Steele?
Still out available space for more tie downs and more leased space. Is that true? Or are you reaching your limit?
No, we have,
Back on the backside.
tie-downs are occupied about 75 to 80% occupancy now. I think everyone knows about 42% of Deerfield is built atop the former landfill. It's an ever-changing.
It's mobile.
Stuff decomposes.
The purpose of the reconstruction out there is to reclaim that reclaimed land. And some of the areas that have been reclaimed in the past, we are going to be leasing them out for private development. In fact, we have 2 leases that we rather than on the street.
You've been filling in. I mean, every time I go by there, I look out there. My view is obstructed more and more.
We're doing about $9.5 million construction this year, about $8.5 last year. And we anticipate somewhere from 6 to 4 this year. That's not reflected in these documents. It's rather under promise and over delivered.
Sure. Do you get any complaints about traffic, aircraft traffic in and out of Merrill Field? I mean, Air Force Base probably takes most of the heat.
Add helicopters into there, okay? We're both laughing because we get helicopter calls all the time.
Once in a great while.
Oh, yeah.
You need to get those whispering helicopters.
Usually not more than 2 or 3 a day.
Yeah, exactly.
2 or 3 a day.
Well, that's good.
Thank you.
So you have your line down.
No, it actually, when I get calls, and often they are because of not following the traffic pattern, or flying too low, then I can.
New type of equipment coming in. Some of those helicopters are already equipped for
I
air.
literally call it pilot and explain to them that
We're
we
watching.
should be flying friendly. The refrain I often get from pilots is, well, who's here first? The airport or the residents? And I said, almost invariably, the airport. The plane is moot. How many pilots are there? How many residents are there? And if you want to have a heavy-handed government weighing in, explaining to you, regulating to you what you can and cannot do, keep being unfriendly.
There you go.
This is all
I've
Tim.
actually threatened a couple of them with eviction from Merrill Field.
I think you've been doing it well out there in terms of managing a growth operation. I don't get any calls, so.
Then what we'll do is we'll start telling people don't like helicopters to call you.
Yeah.
Got it?
Fly west, man.
We'll get your number, and both he and I will send them to you.
Eric's go over Eric. So.
Part of it is just the type of the helicopter. The smaller ones tend to disrupt the air a lot more, and people just complain about it.
To me, it means money. It means business. It does. The noise doesn't bother me.
I know, but the guy that's on his... I've got one guy
Points him
that's
out.
there. It's just crazy. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see it says you're going to be hiring 3 seasonal temporary employees, depending on the impact of the winter's OPS expenses. What's the OPS expense?
Operations. And we hire seasonal summer folks every year. If we have a really expensive winter operating cost, then we don't.
Oh, I see. So what do these employees do in the summer?
Basically the same thing our guys are doing. Mowing, weeding, crack sealing, moving obstructions, that type of program. Crack sealing in particular is problematic. It has been basically ignored for 15 years.
Mhm.
We are way behind for
I see.
Anything else, Pete?
And so, how has security been? You've installed quite a few cameras and things.
We are wrapping up a $3.5 million security program this year. It includes new cameras, better gate operators, higher fences, and that's better lighting. And this will be an ongoing program. There's never going to be a panacea. The irony is the Merrill Field is more secure than any other GA airport in the state. And the vandalism we had 2 summers ago focused only on airplanes that were behind the security fence. The ones that were sitting out in the open where anybody can drive up to, climb on, none of them were touched.
Inside job.
No, not an inside job, but a smart job, in the sense that we used to, at the pilot's request, we showed where all the cameras showed on field, and people would like to get, I want to be in this spot because I can go online and see it.
Right.
I don't want this spot because I can't see it. Well, that, if anybody wanted to look at that, they could also see what areas were surveilled and which were not. Turns out, the vandalism was only in the areas that were not surveilled. And the conjecture, there's about $10,000 worth of reward money out there now. The smart conjecture is that it was a gang initiation.
Mm. Well, my initial thought was if somebody had a big inventory of
Tires?
plane tires that they needed to sell, but that's just me.
That
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
definitely is not the case, because there's a backlog of months to get tires.
Really?
And the folks that build them offered to sell them at cost. That is clearly not the case. And it wasn't people that knew how to manage an airplane. There's so many things you could do that would permanently disable it or long-term disable it. This was pure, simple vandalism.
Amy?
He asked my question.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, it's really glad, Mr. Bowers, that you did note that there are complaints that come in, and the primary complaints that I hear are based on noise, out of pattern, like you mentioned, and overloaded engines that are really, 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 really loud and shake windows. And so it's good to hear that you are getting calls and you're telling folks that if they don't play well with others, there might be a penalty, because I hear a lot of complaints. So thank you for making it clear.
Other questions from assembly members?
The engine you're referring to is a 100% power, the worst of the lot, it's a 185 to 2-liter crop.
Yep.
The manufacturer's recommendation is 100% power. If they cut it back to about 85%, it keeps the wingtips below the speed of sound and to eliminate that high pitch.
Right.
Wherever I've talked to pilots about that, they say, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. The manufacturer says fire along, that's not working. That's what creates the noise.
Yep. I mean, there are a lot of variables for sure.
Okay, Lance, you want to move to capital?
Okay. Nothing from, calls on personnel, got one current position, range. So some changes in the organization on the capital side. Actually, Quebec has been on the capital program for a couple of years. So this is a continuation goes with that, pays that back. It's obviously the largest portion of this program, and it's primarily federal grants with supporting all disability and capital. So if you have any questions on the capital status of these, Paul, is this the final phase of tax agreement? Of course. Okay.
Chris?
Yeah, so just the 480 there under property acquisition, was that grant awarded?
This is for 18.
Yeah, but was it awarded is the question. So
We have no grants for 18 yet. We have applied for them, we won't know probably until April, May time.
okay.
Any other questions from assembly members? Thank you for being here.
Lance's info said about 90% of our operations are up to date. The AIP, Airport Improvement Program funding, is administered by the FAA through the Airport Navigation Trust Fund, applies only to capital projects. It cannot be used for operation expenses. All of the operating costs are self-generated by the airport through landing fees and others. Not landing fees, hideout fees.
Thank you for being here, sir. We appreciate it.
Next up is Mr. White.
Favorite power company?
So similar to solid waste, we have sort of two businesses, gas and electric. Start with the larger. So the highlights for the, those of you that might be looking at the book, on page 15, and then on page 15 is where the highlights are. But for the most part, ML&P, I don't think there's, similar to solid waste, while they're doing a lot of different things, there's no changes in 17 to 18 that are significant. There's no rate increase being proposed for 2018 for ML&P. Total amount of the budget, particularly on the capital side, is very much the same as it was in 2017. It's a very complicated business between gas and electric. I'm not sure there's any one thing I'd want to point out to the assembly that in the past you've been interested in, and that is, do you have any significant capital improvements that are unique, or do you have any rate increases? We can talk about going into each one of these, but I don't think, again, the numbers, there's a hell of a lot of numbers here. But unless there's anything in particular about MRP that you have an interest in, as it relates to the budget, really nothing that I can highlight. The positions are basically going to be the same from this year to next year, about 260 folks in the operations on the electric side. They have 260 positions total inside the entire operation, so unless there's something particular we wanted to.
Well, let's find out. I've got some people already lined up. Chris, you're first.
Yeah,
Then Eric.
the never-ending saga of the undergrounding in the downtown. Just kind of let you know that the administration probably has told you that they're working on an ordinance and we're in discussions. The Utilities Committee is going to be convening to bring you and Chugash and the telecom communities together for a conversation probably next month. So you'll be hearing about it soon.
Okay.
I'm going to want your help to make sure they're doing their job there.
I know we also have a meeting scheduled with the union folks on November the 1st.
Right, and so they're kind of...
It is related to undergrounding, but it deals more with the street lights as opposed to the wires.
Yeah, and that's in the downtown, right? Yeah,
Yes.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Eric?
So how many, at the bottom, statistical performance trends, residential, there's residential customer at 50 kilowatt, I want to come back to that, but total residential sales are slightly down, commercial and industrial sales again slightly down, leading to slightly down. Is that first number residential consumer the amount, the rate for 500 kilowatt?
102 and the 113.
102 and 113, yeah.
Right, we do a comparison with the other utilities within the rail belt, and each utility does it slightly different, but they pick a average number of kilowatt hours that the residential customer uses. For us, it's 500. I believe for Chugash it's 550. And then we do a comparison based on, for those number of kilowatt hours at our rate and the number of kilowatt hours based at their rate, so that we can demonstrate, where we are in the mix. And from 17 to 18, the difference is the rate increase that we had. It was not for a full year in 17.
Okay, so why does that number gone up so much in the last 2 years and is projected to go down over the next 5? Why are we at a peak?
Part of the cost of the electricity is the gas, and since we own the gas bill, we pass through the price of that gas. The gas bill was originally financed in '96 with bonds. Those bonds will be paid off, I believe it's either at the end of 18 or early in 19. And when those bonds are paid off, we have no more debt service or no more return associated with those bonds, and it drops the price of the gas that we pass through to our customers. In fact, if you look at the gas transfer price this year, we are at, I believe, $3.52 per MCF, and the market price is about $7.50. So we're significantly under the market, but it will go down even more once the bonds are paid off, because there's no debt service or return associated with the production of that gas.
But then we bought some more, is that another 20-year of financing, or we did that a different?
We bought the additional share that we bought, we purchased with monies that had been set aside for the benefit of the customers through deferred sales and other needs. And as we had collected enough money to do that, we were able to take cash for the acquisition of the additional share, so there is no debt associated with it.
Yeah, that's what I need to know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at the workforce projections, and under regulatory, we're going from 5 to 7. Does that have something to do with the Provident Hospital challenging lawsuit or anything, or?
It has to do with a couple of things. One, we have reorganized the way that we are structured. And so one of the individuals from operations area, which was our gas analyst, basically the person that nominates the gas for us every 4 hours, also watches and monitors the field. He moved over to regulatory because regulatory has the responsibility for day-to-day operations of the gas field in conjunction with the contractor that runs the field for us. We have also beefed up our regulatory bench because of not only the, I'll say the aggressiveness with which some of our customers participate, but because of the level of things that we end up being involved in, whether they be Instar or other utilities. Singsa, the gas storage, we're involved in that case. It's now actually gone to the Supreme Court. And we have known for some time that we need to rewrite our tariff. It's very old. There are provisions of it that need to be rewritten. And in anticipation of that, we're trying to get people, because right now all we can do is keep up with the cases that we're involved in. We can't rewrite the tariff, and there are things that we need to rewrite in the tariff. And so those additional resources, that additional person will actually help us get that done.
Okay. All right, great, thank you.
Mr. Bowski, ma'am.
Thank you. Mark, I'm looking at your 2018 to 2023 capital improvement program, and I'm trying to understand the PRU and what these numbers exactly are going to represent for that. Oh, you want to paper? Can you just give us a general and why we're seeing the trending for the student?
Certainly, and I will tell you, I was going to mention after Lance's intro, and didn't get the opportunity, but what we projected in 2018 for BRU was that we would be drilling wells. And so we have increased costs because we will drill wells. That's to maintain the production of the field. The wells that we have there, in most cases, are relatively old, and we can maintain production by doing well workovers, which you go in, clean out the well, you do some other things, and so it will maintain production. Those things have kind of, for a 2-year window, they kind of fell off, because when Conoco announced they were going to sell, they didn't want to spend any money. And then with the first year, the first 4 months were Conoco, the last 8 months were Hillcore as an operator. Conoco, again, didn't want to spend any money. Hillcore needed to learn the field in order for us to get to the point where we could put a capital budget together. What we looked at is that we would need to drill approximately 2 wells a year for a period of about 6 years to access the reserves that are there and have them ready to be behind pipe when we need to gas. And looking at 18, we have also, with our partners, Hillcore and Chugach, made a change in the way that the field is operated. Under Conoco, they operated it to produce, I will say, a maximum amount of gas, because they were in a position that they would take whatever, our share was 1/3, but if we couldn't use the 1/3 that was produced, they would take the gas and then just owe us the money. Hillcore, as a company, doesn't take that approach. They don't necessarily want to have to buy the gas from you because they can produce it cheaper themselves, and so they only want to produce what's going to be used. Since we're the majority owner, we have set it to where we operate it as what's referred to as plateau. So we know how much everybody needs, and we produce to that amount based within a certain range. And what that required was that we would drill 2 wells each year for about 6 years. Looking at 18, Hillcore came in, and we have seen costs go down since they took over because they are more efficient in doing some of the things that need to be done. And they said, we think that we can do well workovers of existing wells, maintain that plateau production, and not necessarily have to spend that amount of money. So what that translates in 2018, we'll spend about $2 million as opposed to 11. Now, it's going to just push it out because at some point we're going to have to drill the wells. But they are looking at, drill a well, it's about $5 million per well. Under Conoco, that amount was $7 or $8 million a well. So it is cheaper, but it's still really expensive when you actually drill wells. And so most of that is to drill wells to maintain the production of the field.
Anything else, ma'am? Pete? Sorry, Tim? I was going to him next, but go ahead.
He's
All right.
pointing.
The other old guy.
Yeah, how many wheels are you currently operating over there?
I believe we have 17 wells and I think 15 are active.
I'm just thinking it may be worthwhile, except for startup fees and so on and so forth, to drill something. Drill a well a year or something, or is it two is what a crew can do, or what's the rationale for the two? I guess that's to meet the need theoretically, but.
The rationale is to be as cost effective as possible in drilling wells. You go out and drill one well, and it may cost you $7 or $8 million. If you drill two, it costs you $5.
Okay.
And they have a drilling rig that is within the inlet, and they can move it around, and that's part of why they are more efficient cost-wise. But what we have looked at doing as well is when we drill the two wells, historically, when Conoco would drill a well, they would put the casing in, and then you perf the casing where you think the gas is. It then comes up, and they would just perf all of the areas where they thought the gas was. And that makes it produce a lot of gas. The problem is that it also makes it susceptible to watering, because the water will come in. Whereas if you go in and you put it in, but you only perf certain sands, it allows you to have gas behind the pipe, so you know that there's gas there. And then you only produce the gas when you need the gas. And the way that they do it is they perf the highest sands first and continue down, so that the water is generally towards the bottom, and that's where the well will start to water. And you need to come up with a mechanism to extract the water and dispose of it. And Hillcore just has a slightly different philosophy in the way that they do things. But they would like to go in and drill 2 or 3 wells, maybe cap one of the wells, not actually use it, but it's already there, and it's a sunk cost, but it makes it a lot cheaper to do it that way than it does to drill one at a time.
What's the life expectancy in the field?
Currently, we're projecting that it will go through 2033 to 2035. We are picking up on the next reservoir analysis. So within the next couple of years, we'll do another reservoir analysis to project. Hillcore is, I would say, very optimistic about the life of the field, that they can actually extend the life of the field. And as we looked at it when we purchased it, the additional share is that we're using less gas because of the efficiency of 2A. In fact, you see in the budget that our gas production cost is lower. And that helps us because there's obviously a finite amount of gas in the tank. And if we use it more sparingly, it will extend the life of the field. And we think there is a possibility that we'll extend it beyond 2035.
And a projection in terms of solar, are you guys, you and you guys going to pick up the second phase of the Fire Island wind farm? Not solar, wind.
We are not. We have not been part of that discussion. And some of that is strategic in the rate case that we have before the RCA, and the suggestion by a number of folks that there is too much generation in the rail belt. And so we were not a part of that conversation. There have been conversations with Golden Valley and Chugach to take that additional capacity. One of the challenges for anybody that wants to take it is there's a single line, transmission line, that comes from Fire Island across. It was built with additional capacity, but it doesn't necessarily have the redundant capacity to where it can move all of the power. And so if you happen to be an owner of phase 2 and something happens to part of the capacity, you can't get your power because phase 1 has a failure. It would be extremely expensive for them to build another line, and that was primarily financed with state grants.
Right.
So it's still, at this point, because they are looking for a 25-year commitment, the price of the power is still more expensive than what we can produce it for with our current generation. And that's another reason why we had not participated in it. You mentioned solar with wind, so I'll answer your solar question too, even though you really didn't ask.
I didn't hear you.
We have looked at utility-grade solar projects that are between 5 and 10 megawatts. We also looked at, prior to the current efforts with Egan and Denina, to put solar panels on top of those as well as the library. What we found at the time was it was not cost effective. Their price was in excess of $120 a megawatt. We can produce for 50. And we have continued to work with them because we believe there's an opportunity to put something out on the base. The base has they're less cost sensitive when it comes to the price of power, as long as it's green. And so there are opportunities to be able to perhaps put something out there and generate solar and sell it directly to them.
Do you have a program to sell or to encourage solar energy? I suspect that you discourage it as opposed to encourage it, but with your ratepayers.
We do not have a specific program to encourage it, but we also don't discourage it, because the economics, it will work for some people, either residential or home or commercial customers. And the reason that it works, I actually had a conversation with an employee just this morning. They said, I don't get it. Why? You said that it costs too much for us, but homeowners putting it in, so somehow it must work. The homeowner or business offsets the entire cost of a price per kilowatt. Included in that price per kilowatt is the cost of recovering the lines that we have, the transformers and all the other equipment. When we look at it in producing it for our own use and then sell, we're looking at it purely on the price of producing the power.
Yeah.
And that's where it doesn't make sense. With a business or a residential customer, their payback period could be 8-10 years, but if the solar panels last for 25 years, they're going to see benefit on that for anywhere from 12 to 15 years.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks. Going back to your summary budget, I just noticed an anomaly I couldn't quite figure out. And I'm trying to understand, in 2020, you project a pretty solid increase in your net operating income and a really big boost in cash. So it shows like $12 million above the previous year and $40 million of cash. I'm curious what that might be to look forward to. Yeah, and it's the 2020 column there, net income, and then down below it's the cash position there.
And what I will say is that it is forecasted, and similar questions have been asked in the rate case, and we are trying to project out where we think things are going to go. We are projecting the fact that we will see a decline in the fuel expense. We're projecting that we'll see no revenue increase necessarily, but the cash and the other things are guesses for us. And the farther out you get, the less good the guess is.
Right.
But we don't, I can get you a specific answer. I don't necessarily have an answer for you on the, you're looking, I'm assuming, for the general and restricted cash, which
Yeah.
jumps from 84 to $125 million.
Right, and then it stays pretty high in the projection, and so that, and also that similar year at the top, 17 to 29 million in operating income, net operating income. And so that seems like a pretty good jump, and it sounds great. I would love to know what that's based on,
I will be happy to get an answer and send it to all.
because we'll support more of that, whatever it is.
I would support it as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, these wells that Hillcorp's planning to drill, are these traditional wells, or are they going to be doing some fracking?
All of the wells that to my knowledge, all the wells that we have drilled out there have been traditional wells. I don't believe that any of the partners have plans to do any fracking. I know that there is a company that is looking at some fracking opportunities, and they are not the first one that did it, but I believe they're somewhat closer to making it a reality. But the issue that they have is that you have to have a market to sell the gas to, and right now most of the gas market is tied up with the utilities, with either Hillcorp or us.
Right.
And there's not much in a way of a market, and so unless you increase the market, you're not going to have a place to sell your gas, and they won't end up producing.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from assembly members? Mark, are we doing anything with the dividend we used to get? The RCA stopped us from getting one. Are we doing anything with that? Appealing it, protesting it, or whatever to try and get it reinstated?
We have not, we did obviously work with the administration and the assembly to change the dividend rules, the way that it's calculated, some of the safeguards around it. We have worked to demonstrate that our equity management plan, that equity is not going to drop as low as it was anticipated. And the plan was, working with the administration, is to get through this rate case. We'll have a decision in March of 18, and then go in and ask for an increase or the ability to reinstate the dividend, because we believe we'll be in a position where we can demonstrate that with the new methodology of calculating the dividend, that whatever we make, we can pay a dividend and build equity at the same time.
Because they did not give you any definition of what they wanted to see out of you. They just said, we're not going to let you have it. And you'd think they'd have to give you some parameters on what they were expecting, but from what I saw, they didn't even do that. They just said, we're not comfortable with where it's going.
And I think it falls into the category of he who makes the rules gets to make the decision.
I know.
And they don't have to tell you what the rule is. And historically, when people have challenged that, they have not, the courts have given deference to the RCA. I think that when we go back in to request reinstatement, we will push for some definition of what the rules should be. I think that historically, we have always been in a pretty good equity position. Now, if you go back enough years, we were not. But if you compare us with our other utilities within the rail belt, we have more equity than they do. We're in a much better position, so it's somewhat confusing, troubling, whatever you want to say, that we're better off than them. They're allowing them to pay dividends to, granted, they are their co-op owners, but they allow them to pay dividends, and yet they won't allow us to pay dividends.
Is the RCA a creature of the state?
They are.
So we could, if we had got hold of the state legislature, they could make a change to it. My feeling it just needs fundamentally changed, because it's flawed for them to say you can't have a dividend, but we're not going to tell you under what criteria we're basing this decision.
The RCA is a subset of the state, and it is renewed every, I believe, 5 years, but they got an extension the last time around, and then it comes up for sunset. And I actually worked at the Alaska Public Utilities Commission when it was there, and I left just before they sunsetted because the commissioners at the time were not meeting the requirements of the state or the legislature. And they then created the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. The commissioners themselves have, I believe it's a 5-year term, and so once they're on the commission, they can't necessarily be replaced. But the agency itself can be sunset, and I think that the sunset provision comes up early in the 20s, so 2021 something.
Okay. Thank you. Also, going back to payroll, I was talking to Ms. Dombowski. She really appreciated what you did to immediately pay our employees. We have the 3rd November payroll coming up. Would you please have a mechanism in place that if this SAP problem continues, you're there to write the checks to get our employees paid? Because I don't want to see our employees have payroll problems. No one should have to put up with that after they've done a good job for us.
And I agree with you. Unfortunately, Mr. Chair, we don't have a way to pay employees because we work through the city for those.
Then get Mr. Harris there.
And I have been working with Mr. Harris, and when I met with some of those individuals that came and spoke to you on Tuesday night, they said, well, why don't you just write a check? And I said, I could, but I don't have any checks. And we are actually having conversations today with the payroll department related to a couple of the employees and what we believe are some fixes that if they do those will solve that particular issue. But And they will believe that if we get them that information, which we have previously provided, but provided it again, that they believe that they can fix it and we won't have the issue.
Okay, good. Because this issue's not going away until our employees are paid accurately.
We saw
Tim?
we saw it coming, we talked about it, and it happened anyway, and so it upsets me, but I think you guys have more complexity in your rate schedules and how you calculate wages for folks than some of the other utilities, and so you seem to be having more issues than the
We
other
do,
folks.
but one of the things that is going to help is that we have come off of the construction season because the right-of-way closed, and so about, I believe it was the 23rd, we went to 5/8 instead of 5/10, 6/10, or 7/10. That will cut down because one of the issues for those individuals that came and talked, and also the individual that talked with Mr. Dowski, is that it had to do with overtime. Since they're not working overtime, that part of it shouldn't be a problem. I'm not saying there won't be a problem. I'm saying that part of it should not be a problem, and we'll attempt to make sure that any of the other issues aren't a problem either.
Thank you, Mark. Lance, you want to go finish?
Sure. Unless there's any questions on these capital programs, I think.
Any questions from some of your members? Don't appear, Benny. Thank you, Mark, for coming to see us.
You've been at it for an hour and a half. You need to 5 minutes at ease, or you really want to
Keep
go
going.
through it?
You want to take 5 minutes at ease? No. Rock and
Yeah,
roll.
keep going.
Mr. Bowski, you've got to go do your other job.
Yeah, I'll return in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
It's fine.
So let's move on to AWW. We'll start with the water utility. Similar to Mark's organization, it was rather complex, but frankly, the changes in the staffing is really no changes in the staffing from 17 to 18. The overall programs, while there are some changes between 17 and 18, the one thing that you have been recognized, that I mentioned before, is that they're proposing a rate increase on their water by 3% and on their wastewater by 2.5%. Those are changes that are being proposed as part of this budget. And their capital program is pretty much the same as it was in the past. They do use the state's, their loan program from the states to help support their capital improvements. Clean water, drinking water. Thank you. Thanks, sir. So, unless you have a particular question, I can walk through each one of these. This is the water utility, and then basically have two separate utilities. The ratings, whether they're doing bonding, are separate for each one of them. While they have the same rating, they're looked at individually. But I can walk you through each one of these. So on the water utility side, I'm not sure if there's anything particular I'd point out here except the rate increase. Unless you have a particular question on that one. I'll go to the next slide. The revenues and expenses. I think, one thing I wanted to point out here was that you have an increase in their labor budgets, basically, so does everyone, so does all the other departments. This is a natural adjustment due to labor costs. We saw a lot of that in general government. Non-labor is up just a little bit. Those are some of the big things I wanted to show you there.
Mr. Bowski, ma'am.
Thank you. Right before I leave, I want to ask you a couple questions. First, we see a huge jump in IGCs, and you've seen this in other departments. I'm assuming it's relating to SAP, but I'd like for you to talk about that. And the other thing is, it seems like maybe we should bring this up at Enterprise, but it's a continual, I'd love to know where we're at with our permits. Especially Asplin, and if you can talk a little bit about, that, and, it doesn't look like from your summary you're really worried about it, but I would love a little update.
I'm not losing too much sleep about the permits in general. We'll talk a little bit about IGCs. The SAP costs are built into IGCs going forward, and that's somewhat of an increase. We've got some other general increases in IGCs, and that's helping drive our overall cost structure. So, as Lance mentioned, the biggest part of our cost increase for 2018 is going to be in the labor, and that in particular has to do with reclassification of about 22 different classes of positions in the plumbers union. So we're happy to say that we're putting those folks on par with their peers in other municipal agencies. So that's going to step up. With respect to the permits, more particularly, Asplin is the beluga whale in the room, so to speak. We are now in our 12th year of administrative extension of the permit that we earned first, but that was provided to us in 2000. We continue to demonstrate that we have no adverse effect on the waters. We have had no feedback on our submission of a final draft biological evaluation for endangered species. Our evaluation of biological belugas did that in 2011. With the new federal administration, I don't think there's going to be any rapid motion to pursue that permit. We're looking forward to meeting and working with the new Region 10 administrator to make ourselves known and understand what their issues are. Girdwood is also under a long-term administrative extension. We're still working with the DEC to figure out what the right solution is to ensure that we're not putting trace metals, particularly copper, into the stream that would have a detrimental effect on salmon fisheries. And we're making some headway there. That's driving our wastewater budget. We are budgeting capital funds for the enhancement and replacement of that aged wastewater process structure, process equipment. But we're not going to pull the trigger, so to speak, on making those improvements until we have a good understanding of what our current requirements are going to be. So hopefully we can wrap that up in the next year. But we do see capital funds continue to be put toward that end.
Anything else from some of my members? Tim?
Is there an easy way to take copper out of that discharge stream before it goes out? I would think some type of filament.
Well,
or something.
there are methods that are pretty effective, but they're very expensive.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Lance.
All right, I think the only other thing I wanted to just highlight for two things for the AWW. While they're not able to provide a dividend this year, they're going to start doing that in 19, and that will definitely help us out in 6-year forecasting. On their capital side, on the capital budget for the water utility, like you can look at these projects, and we do coordinate these with project management and engineering. A lot of the projects are very similar in type and scale that you saw in 2017. If there's a particular question or concern about one of these, we can get you a response to them. I don't know if you have an opportunity to look at these as of late, but if you do, just let me know, and I'll get a hold of Brett and Eric.
Questions, Chris?
Not a question, just a comment. Thanks. I've
Thanks,
been
Andy.
to 3 shows at the PAC in the last 6 months, and every one of the performers said, "Oh my God, you can drink the water out of the tap." So these are international scale performers. So keep it up.
In spite of the fluoride, you can drink the water?
Yeah, we'll take care of that.
And your teeth won't fall out.
Thank you.
On the wastewater side, it's pretty much the same. There's really no significant changes here. On the wastewater side, they're not in a situation the near term without doing that. But they are putting a lot of capital investment inside of the wastewater side of the house as well, so. If there's any particular changes here on the personnel, pretty much the same level of personnel I had this year. And on the capital program, there's not a particular project here that I want to point out unless Brett or this one, doing water and wastewater, doing for that, we did something. If there's one in your district that you have a question on, we'll definitely get your response.
Any questions from assembly
I only
members?
point out, Lance, if I may, that with respect to changes in interest, also in terms of the wastewater side, we see that reducing our interest costs. We just went through a refunding exercise for our revenue bonds. Lance is correct in saying that we make heavy use of the state revolving funds for clean water and drinking water. But we also rely on more conventional utilitarian tool of revenue bonds, but with refunding, we're saving interest expense. I mean, I think the projection of savings that we work on with Paris and Ross Griswold will account for about a $26 million saving over the life of the bond issuance. So with the help of the municipal finance folks, we're trying to keep the cost down on what our debt actually costs us.
Other questions from assembly members? Thank you. Thanks for being here.
The last department is the Port of Anchorage. Steve and Cheryl here. We only have three slides. For the port,
Who?
I know he said the wrong name, but I'll forgive him.
Port of Alaska Anchorage.
No, Lance said the wrong name.
and where was I? I was there Tuesday night too. My apologies.
Why don't we just say P and A?
I will make sure that it's correct when we print the final book.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
As long as it doesn't cost additional
All right.
price.
No.
So on the Port of, for the Port of Alaska, I'm not sure that, there's only a couple things I want to point out here. For our capital improvement program in the past, it's been pretty significant. In this proposed budget, it's about 1.7 million. That does not include any legislative requests the administration may make of the state. But as far as their regular capital program, I don't think there's anything significant in changing their staffing. Their staffing, pretty much the same. They had 6 individuals that were part of the legal team in 2017. Those positions were temporary and they're not part of the positions in 2018. So as far as their total budget, they need to be up a little bit. But other than that, Steve and his crew did a great job with it. That's what I came to. Okay. And then on their capital program, basically as the primary, their investment's going to be on the pilot improvements. And I think the GIS mapping, that is,
That's with Tina and the already, that's our buy-in to the already existing municipality GIS system. Yeah, we've got a lot of need for that. And we've convinced a lot of tenants to participate by helping us populate the system with some of their information about their facilities, since we don't get control over the construction of it. We'll get as-built later, but there's probably a good idea of having where all their plumbing is really located on the port in this with everything else. The cost of the piece of software we have to buy for ourselves is included in that $250,000 because we need to provide a level of proprietary protection of their information.
So there'll be an extra layer of security. That port will be behind, so that we can give those protections, and the right people who need to see it when they need to see it will. Anybody who's out there just looking in general to see what's going on down there, we'll hit a firewall with certain information.
Question from assembly members. Yes, John.
You know, looking our page 39. So you've got tonnage going up, staying relatively stable, but operating revenue per ton drops a bit, and that, I guess that's why your revenues are dropping. So what's the dynamic going on there? I'm just.
On our handout, it was page 39.
This is on the 8-year summary, just reading down the 2018 column. So your revenues are down, and then at the very bottom it says the tonnage is up, but your operating revenue per ton is down.
Done 3.40.
Yeah, from 0.54.
Switching what their cargo down, cement up.
On the very bottom, the operating revenue per ton is 3.4. That's what you're looking at, John?
Well, and that must feed up to why the revenues went down, right?
And what is that?
But yeah, so I don't know why the operating revenue per ton go down.
This is what I'm talking about.
It's funny, so when you go across here, it's 3.41, then down 3.40, 3.41,
But yeah, it could be a mix. Depends on
the
petroleum
revenues
and
are
cement.
total operating and non-operating. The revenue's way at the top.
Yeah. Well, that also went down a lot.
Big time.
Yeah. The
Right,
big
by
number
$8
in
million.
2014 is because of the settlements from the litigation. You won't see those. What's that? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Cheryl Beckham, Coordinating Bridge Finance Director. So in 2016, you see the actual for $40 million. That includes the settlements that we received. In 2016, there's actually $6 million in 2017 as well.
Okay.
So you'll see, that number in the 2017 pro forma. After we anticipate in 2018 and 19 and 21 that they're normalized revenues do that. So that in effect may impact the operating revenue per ton, but that's just math. That's a math sum at the bottom. So there was no projected
Okay.
increase in tonnage when we did this budget, just basically a flat, no decrease either, just a flat, maintaining the business as it is today.
I forgot. Some of the settlement was still in 17.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Tim, anything? Pete, anything?
No, I'm good.
Chris?
So help me understand, this is my first time through this. You have a net income loss every year projected around 40%. How does that work?
I'll try this before I defer to my expert.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Depreciation is counted in there.
Right.
As part of the accounting.
Okay.
And that's where the loss comes from. We'll take the depreciation out.
Okay.
Cash-wise, we're pretty healthy.
It's pretty even. Okay. Thank you.
Tim?
Given the condition of the port, shouldn't you be fully,
Appreciate
you've
it.
written all that off already?
Or increase
No, go ahead.
So Cheryl Beckham again. So in 2015, the tariff was agreed on at the Port of Anchorage, and during that study, it was done with information that was at that time. So there was a policy that was put in place by previous administration that the port would maintain 90 days of operating cash in their fund reserves. So at the time, there was quite a bit more funds in the fund balance. So the tariff that we're operating under now is designed to take those fund balance numbers down to a 90-day operating. So in an effort to, maybe take another look at that, we have a tariff study that will start next year. And, those policies may change depending on what the outcome is that we want, and depreciation may be considered funded
we ought to try and save as much as we can. You know, we've got a huge liability there in terms of.
Yeah, and no argument there. When we look at the tariff next, it'll be from a whole different context that we look at in 5 years. And we'll probably be, when we present this to the Port Commission to then present to you, there'll be some pretty tough decisions that we're all gonna have to make.
Have you found some wads of cash somewhere that we can,
Yeah, and, we found the printing press that was very amazing. We've got dust it off, find the plates.
Thank you.
Pete, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm seeing that we have a rent increase from J-Bear. Are they increasing the space they're using down there?
No,
or-
they've raised the rent.
Raised it.
Really?
Yes. And it's not for certain yet. They directed us to go out and have that land reappraised. And based on what that reappraisal came back after forecasting, that's what the rent increase will be. That will be the new number. Now, we could be pleasantly surprised if it not be that, but that's worst case where we think it'll be. So we're gonna plan for that.
So you think that 150 is pretty realistic?
You know, I don't know how to guess how they're gonna think. I mean, if you looked at when we first entered into this agreement with them, what it was now 12 years ago, and we looked at the appraisal, you know, we thought we were gonna see a number about that big back then. And really, we were leasing it for $15,000 a year. So this appraisal that was just done doesn't value the land any much more than that. But the circumstances could be different, and they're looking for money too. So worst case is they're gonna hit us for what it is exactly. I'd like to think that there's some wiggle room for negotiation because we provide a lot of support to the base, and maybe there's room to negotiate what that actually will be at the end of the day. But they've not presented anything to us yet, so I don't know what to say.
We have to solidify a position and talk to Sullivan and Murkowski about that and see if we can't work out something a little more favorable to us, given our needs.
John?
You know, we just saw the Merrill Field financials, and they rent things out for 20 cents a square foot per year. Maybe you can get that same rate from J-Bear.
From the DOD?
Sure, why not?
I
FAAs?
think we charge them more than that. But they're transient. They don't have a permanent presence down there. But we go to the tariff per square foot rate, and they pay it.
Oh, they're renting from you?
Well, no, that's the offset to this.
Mhm.
But I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Merrill
This is,
Field gives it away.
Yeah.
Free
Well,
land.
you know,
One's FA, there's DOD.
what this
It's all
lease,
government.
what this lease represents is
departments.
the area where we have most of the track that came off the Alaska Railroad main line and came around the port, so that's where the track resides. They get most of the benefit out of that, which is part of what I'm thinking is we can negotiate that until there is a huge demand on the part of the shippers to load rail cars on the port. The principal user of it is the DOD. Now, I can recover the cost of their rent in the rates we charge them for using the rail. So there is room.
Makes sense.
Mr. Steele?
Do they have permanent lay-down area? I mean, is there an area that we don't use there that's permanently theirs? I know they have that also, that access down through there.
No, there's nothing that they have that's permanent. And-
So we can use it and we can generate income from it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's, you know, sometimes it's first come, first served when you're in a really busy cycle. But because we're a commercial strategic seaport, we'll give them serious consideration when we know there's a deployment coming and there's gonna be a requirement to pre-stage equipment. And we've done it enough different ways, in enough different times, to have a plan to have a flex when the area that they usually use is busy occupying somebody else. We've never found ourselves in a situation where we couldn't give them what they wanted.
If we're, it seems to me that they have a vested interest in our upgrades in terms of their, and being a strategic port
Yes.
to react in an emergency in terms of deployment.
They do.
And it seems to me that they ought to help us with a rate or some funding or some costs with,
And we're not alone, as commercial strategic seaports, beating that drum back in Washington. I was back here in September for a strategic ports conference, and Transportation Command got the message loud and clear that being a strategic seaport, there's a lot of paperwork for absolutely no financial reimbursement.
that
So-
at least give it to us free charge in terms of rate.
Well, I'd like to see them contribute a little bit.
That would be
20%.
nice too.
Yeah, 20% of all the cargo that comes across the dock either is military deployments or it goes on the shelf and commissaries and exchanges.
What do we receive for that, other than just the cost of the ship tie down?
Right, well, they pay the tariff rates and we get a very nice thank you. And so, but I'll tell you, General Wilsbaum, the 3-star on the base, just wrote a very nice letter of support for us for our infra grant package that we're submitting for part of the new DOT.
It didn't include a check?
Did not include the check. He's not, he's a 3-star, but I don't think he's right.
As W.C. Fields used to say, it's a hearty hand clasp.
Yes, it is.
Lance? That's about it.
Unless you have any other questions for Steve and his team.
Rose? Amendments, when do you want them to you by?
They're due to our office Monday the 13th by close of business. I'm working on a few of you already on a couple. If you have amendment assistance needs, please let me know as soon as possible.
Just make sure you get your amendments into here. That way it's easier for us. Put them together, bring them to the semi meetings. You'll have more likely chance of getting it approved, rather it's just when you throw on the floor at the last minute. Yes, ma'am.
Turned off
Is there
the
time
computers
for
that. Someone's been trying to hack.
Not
Yeah.
this work session.
And so I don't have-
It's a work session assembly. What do you want to ask us?
Well, I just really,
Yes.
I
I know that.
live in the Sand Lake area, and I just want to give a courtesy to the assembly members that they might be getting phone calls and emails and letter writing in regards to a 1.4 bond issue that we are requesting, that Eric is aware of and Tim is aware of, just because our Sand Lake Community Council meeting is a week from today, and we're going to ask members in the West Park subdivision, as well as those of us that live on Wells, myself, outside of West Park subdivision, because many of you are probably not familiar with the West Park subdivision that went in early 2000, and at that time, those on Wells expressed their concern for no impact to their drinking water, and as far as I know, there's many concerns of water runoff and urban runoff in many areas in the municipality, but not one in particular that is affecting potentially people's well water. And there is science that was newly presented at our special meeting in in August of this year, where 51 constituents voted in favor of passing the 1.4 bond issue that was prepared by Muni members and voted by us to get rid of the bypass system that was put into the West Park subdivision in the case of a heavy rain event that would allow stormwater runoff to go directly into the exposed aquifer. And we never wanted that to happen. We were told that would never happen in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, nothing is documented in a plat note, which I understand is kind of the God's truth, but it was documented in the Terrasat report that was part of all the studies of the concerns back before West Park of 300 plus homes was built. And so I just, as a courtesy, wanted to let you know that there are many people concerned, and they are going to be asking for the 1.4 bond issue that would repair the inadequate storm drain system, because there's been concern for flooding in West Park into their homes and to their streets. And as a result of that, they didn't take into consideration those of us on wells, as we were always led to believe nothing would happen to our water. So that's why I'm here. I know it was not on your issue, but thank you.
Eric, are you working it?
Yeah, we've been working with the administration, Tim and I, and we will have an amendment either for the full amount or for 400 for the planning and then $1 million the next year. That will be coming.
John?
I just want to make sure I got this clear and put it in it colloquially. West Park is the subdivision in the old sand pit, and they're dumping their stormwater into the pond, and you want them to stop doing that.
Exactly, and some
Okay.
people refer to it, it used to be known as Kincaid Estates, some people know it as Pauline's Pond. We call it what it is, they excavated below the water table.
They exposed the
Taking
aquifer.
gravel
I remember
out,
when it
and it's the
happened.
exposed aquifer, but yes, sir, that is exactly right. So, and you can go, is it on our site? Yeah, there's.
It was Coffee's gravel pit.
Yeah, the resolution is on the FCC site, so thank you very much.
Yeah, that
Tim?
has some runoff from the school site in that area, but I don't think the wells have seen any degradation of the wells to date, have they?
Well, unfortunately, we would never know that, Tim, because no one would know to.
Well, you had the contractor that was out testing stuff, didn't he?
Well, he
Come
has,
up with
with
something
his
like that?
newest studies, there is more direct correlation indicating that there has.
But
been
nobody's got
impact.
out and checked the wells on a regular basis to know whether or not there's been any
There's different
signs.
test site wells that he has been testing, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. We look forward to seeing it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, for listening to our.
Meeting's over with. Thanks for being here.